Are you ready this time?
To quote Levi.
Amen.
Nice. I can appreciate that.
I hope you can bring the audio levels up of him just going, nice. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lake and Post Show, or the host show with the Mo Show, the Mo and Joe Show. I am Mo. This is Joe. Looking a little different this time. It's probably that, marital glow on you just because you're coming towards your big wedding day in 2 days.
Yep, that would... Oh, because I'm Joe.
Yeah. You're not Joe, but tell the people who you are.
My name is Seth, not to be confused with Johanna.
I get them mixed up all the time.
Apparently
it's the
a
hair.
common occurrence.
It's beautiful,
Yeah, I like plants just like Johanna likes plants. In fact, I guess I kind of have a couple of her plants held captive at my house for the time being.
If you were wearing glasses right now, indistinguishable. There'd be no way to tell you guys apart.
Really?
That's the main thing I say.
Even the shadow here?
Yeah, sometimes that happens for her too. I just think, if Joe had good eyesight, I would not be able to pick her out of a crowd, you know?
If Joe had good eyesight, you wouldn't be able to pick her out of a crowd.
No, not at all. But we are here to break down Levi's sermon, but this week Levi didn't give a sermon, did he?
No, that was some other bloke.
Yeah, he was tied to railroad tracks, and you stepped in to save the day.
Yeah, well, I have a theory that Levi was not actually out hunting for sheep. I think that there's a gold mining conspiracy, and I think that's his real end.
That's why we found that golden ring a moment ago.
Yeah,
It's all left over.
You saw how quick he left.
It's coming full circle, yeah. But Levi was not home to write the sermon to get ready for it, but you did speak about home this week, and I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit. Though you didn't address it immediately, my brain trails off in a lot of different directions, and one of the things I was thinking about is, like, how do you define home? Like, what does home mean to you? Is it actually a place? Is it people? What is home to you, and where has felt like home?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a family that moved a lot, so it was kind of hard to have the regular feelings of, like, this is my home. I grew up here.
Sure.
Most of my later part of my life, I lived in Washington State, so that felt like home. But I think when I say home, and when I probably alluded to home in the sermon, there were two words that I emphasized that I think are wrapped up in the idea of home, not necessarily a location, and that would be familiarity and intimacy. And the way I look at familiarity is just something you know, something that you can, for lack of better words, control. Something you can expect, and then intimacy would be a place, a person, a space that you could entrust your vulnerability to give someone, or a place your emotional intimacy. And so that's how I look at intimacy, just a place to be vulnerable.
It's good that you can identify that, because I think there's probably a lot of people out there watching this, and myself included, who have tried to plant their roots somewhere, and it just didn't come across as home. I've been at places where I've lived for a few months and just been like, this isn't home. And you get that feeling of homesickness, but identifying intimacy is probably the thing that's missing. You don't have that person, or the connection to the place, and sometimes it's intangible. You can't put your finger on it, but there's a gut feeling, or maybe that's a faith feeling that's just this is not my place, these are not my people, this is not home.
I would say that the idea of home, of being able to be intimate and familiar, is really a shadow of what God has placed in our heart, the desire to know Him, and for Him to be our familiarity and our intimacy. I said in the sermon that the Christian life is the never-ending call to displace the heart from what it knows into the hands of God. And so home, I would say, is like a shadow or a picture of what God wants us to have with Him.
Yeah, and I've seen in people around me that sometimes being too familiar can be a negative thing. You get kind of stuck in your daily rut, and you're in this zone of comfort. And speaking about familiarity makes me think of another thing I trailed off on, was the idea of unfamiliarity. It can breed growth in us. It can challenge us to change who we are. Stepping outside of our comfort zones can inherently bring us closer to God, and in that it shapes us as more of a human being that reflects His image properly,
Yeah, I would say that familiarity can be kind of like a bubble wrap that we put ourselves in, because we can control it. And sometimes the last thing God wants you to do is control things. He wants to know you. And if you can get to a place, or if he brings you to a place where you can pull back some of those layers of, the favorite TV show, or the favorite friend group, or the favorite daily habits, he has the opportunity to reach out and touch you in an unfamiliar way. And, that sounds kind of vague, but what I mean is simply to see God in a way that you haven't seen him, to feel him in a way that you haven't felt him. And the reality is, most people don't, love to cope with this, but there are a ton of areas in our lives that are not familiar with God. So we're called to make those areas open to him, and that's hard. It doesn't feel like home at first, and that's the whole practice of Christianity, is putting our home somewhere where it should be, not on this earth.
And I often think about, like, you're newlywed. Johanna and Willie, they're getting married this week, and you kind of can build a comfort pocket within your immediate family, right? Like your spouse.
We love those noodle Fridays, making up some indomie.
People don't know what that is, but
that probably has.
But what I'm saying is, like, you can sort of insulate yourself by having this partner, this person that if you enter into a room and you have your partner with you, that room instantly becomes more comfortable, right? Like going into an uncomfortable place becomes more comfortable when you have that person with you. And I think as you grow in your faith, and as you grow in your relationship with Christ, as you learn to carry him in your heart, he can become that comfort pocket with you. That call outwards towards stepping into the unfamiliarity to grow. If you have the comfort of the loving Father and he's with you, that can be such an encouragement to step out and grow into those uncomfortable places.
The reality is that when you have something good, something wholesome and beautiful, like my marriage with my wife, who's actually sitting right here, you want it to be shared. I would love for Johanna and Willie to have the same marital bliss that, there's ups and downs that we have. And I think that's the same way with our relationship with God. Is if you don't have that home with God, then you're not bringing him into the rooms that you're walking into. And they can't be rooms that are filled with God, because you don't really even have this thing with God. And so this idea of making him our home, making his presence our most familiar space, it's not just for us, it's so that we are these ambassadors of this unforeseen light, to where we're walking into rooms or our place of work, or just crowds and conversations, and people are put back almost, because there's so much not us in us, and there's so much him in us, and we can't produce that no matter how hard we try.
Well, speaking of producing it, I always love to get it to a point of practicality within the show, because we can go so far out in the weeds and talk about the
90 steps of sanctification.
I just want to speak for a second. Do you think, is there a way, I love what you said about, like, making home with God. Is there a practical step towards that, if someone's listening in, that you can think of, like, what's one step that they could take, whether that's a book or some sort of practice, a daily practice, or anything like that, you could just take that next step towards making a home with God?
I would say pray more. And I didn't value prayer as I should have early in my walk with God, and I think I didn't hear from him a lot because I wasn't actually facilitating any time of a conversation with him. There's a theologian, I forget his name, I'm quoting someone who quoted him, and the person that quoted him said that the most romantic place in the universe is the prayer closet. And I know that some of us might know what a prayer closet is, but what he was getting on was that the purest experience of love that you could ever have is pushing away everything, either at the beginning, middle, or end of your day, and coming into the presence of God, because prayer is the power of God. And if you don't desire it, if you don't practice it, then you haven't experienced it. Because once you experience it, you can't stop. And so I would say, If there are something that we could give you through this post show that I'm on, it would be that if you don't feel familiar with God, talk to him. Yeah. And if you don't hear back from him, wait. Because a lot of people have missed out on the greatest conversations with God because they ran out of words to say. And oftentimes the best thing that we can do is just be silent before God. So that would be something I would throw out there.
I'm actually familiar with that theologian. It was Betty White.
Betty White?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We love you. We'll see you next week.
Bye. For a split second, I was like, who is this theologian I haven't heard of? Betty White, Betty White, Betty White. And then it clicked.